And what they found is actually the brain, it can still communicate, even in people where that is severed. So basically where there's no connection between the left and right sides of the brain. Gary Nolan told me about this, and I remembered reading a study. So actually the two halves of the brain can communicate without having a direct neuronal connection.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Chris Lehto. Chris, welcome back, my friend.
Good to be back. It's been a long time.
Yeah, we went. I see you're wearing the same shirt as I am because it's been a long time. We commemorate this reunion with same clothing, same lighting too. Anyway, so we're kind of talking a little bit about kind of hinting at disclosure, what the nature of reality is with your kind of macroscopic organisms and things. By the way, I have like several anthologies that I wrote, and there was an author, his name is Stephen Barnes. He's a science fiction writer, and he actually wrote a short story leveraging the concept that you're talking about how nation states are living things. But he went up one level of extraction, like with Japanese companies. They have like the Keiretsu. So he had this concept of kind of a super state that was also a living entity. It was just at a higher level than the nation state. So there's definitely, like, that concept is definitely in the ether. I think he wrote that in, I think I had like a weird World War IV anthology. It was like science fiction, fantasy, that sort of thing, with a concept of the world war after the next world war, basically. But he had it as between like these super states that people didn't realize existed and didn't realize they were alive, but they were. So anyway, something you should check out. I forget what the name of the story is, but
that is interesting. Yeah, originally I've had the idea for many years and I didn't know how to relay it. And I thought of writing like a fiction book like that initially.
Yeah, it's just a short story, right? It's good for concepts like that. But that story immediately came to mind because that's how these things work. I think Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince, would get an idea and he would freak out and like call all his recording professionals in at like odd hours because he had to record this song before Michael Jackson recorded the same song, right?
Wow.
Because it's just, these things are in the ether. People get inspired. It's like the same reason that Isaac Newton and Leibniz both independently invented calculus, right? So anyway, so what is this? Like, what is the phenomenon? Is it ET? Is it interdimensional? Is it kind of a manifestation of Gaia as part of a control system? Is it all of the above? Do we live in a Buck Rogers universe? Like, where are you trending on this?
Yeah, well, I've interviewed enough people more professionally than me and asked them that question, and they say, I don't know. So I'll start there, but I do have a lot of speculations, and I think we need to try and consider what it is. I'm kind of moved past the ambulance chasing where I just go and, oh, this person said this and I'm going to make a video about it. And I would get more views, I think, or, something happened in Congress and now they're going to have a hearing. So I'm going to cover that. And I've kind of moved past that where it just doesn't interest me anymore. I've moved to kind of a state where I've talked to so many people. I've seen enough evidence, at least in my own mind, that in my view, there is definitely something going on. And so when you start looking at it from that perspective, you kind of feel like you're crazy. I guess, like you mentioned, the people who are in the mental institutions, I start looking and finding that there is a lot of evidence, scientific evidence for telepathy, right? We have a lot of actual real science experiments that have been done, with people in Faraday cages. You have the Ganzfeld experiments. I interviewed Dean Radin. I hope to interview him in the next month. He has a new book coming out. He's done his
He's
own
amazing.
experiments.
Has he told you about spells and prayers? They're functionally the same thing, and they're real empirically. Like they have empirical, real world effects.
Not directly. I've seen him on other podcasts at least talk about magic and spells, but yeah, I don't know up to that level.
Prayers and spells are functionally the same.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Yeah, exactly. And then you asked like offline, has anything happened to you weird since you've looked into this? And kind of my whole perspective on the world has changed. I grew up atheist, materialistic scientist. Originally I was going to be a scientist. I got a degree in chemistry, material science. And then I just realized it was so boring. Like it was just doing lab work is just so, I just couldn't do it for the rest of my life. Like God bless all those people that can do that and sit in the lab and do countless iterations alone and then write it up in papers that someone may or may not read. So I grew up with that mentality, and it just totally flipped when I started looking into this. And I saw David Fravor. That's really how I got into this in the first place. Is I saw David Fravor's many interviews, and he was a fighter pilot. He went to Top Gun. He was a commander. He's like your cookie cutter, amazing fighter pilot leader. That guy, you could, not him exactly, but basically him, kind of a caricature, and you could just copy and paste him into the top leaders that I saw, great guys you would trust in combat, completely credible, trustworthy, very capable. So everything David Fravor said, and he talked in those fighter pilot terms, just really kind of knocked my world off. Like I remember just the week after, just like walking around, just like staring at the sky or staring off into the distance, kind of changed my viewpoint. So then it gets down to what is real and what is reality. And so, could these sort of things be actually real, right? If the universe is more of like a simulation, we don't really know what matter is. I already mentioned we don't know we don't know what inertia is. Our physics doesn't know. We can't even devise an experiment to even test what consciousness is. Like science can't even think of a way to test for consciousness. Really, the one thing that you and I can agree, I think we're having an experience. I may be totally fake, like a figment of your imagination, but at least you can prove to yourself, like the one thing that's true is you're having an experience, But our whole science, everything we've gotten to in whatever thousands of years, can't even think of a way to test for that. Like can't even come up with an idea. So I think we have very much to learn about what reality is. And what about these synchronicities? What about these telepathic anecdotes? What about alien anecdotes? They come into dreams, they're communicating with people in dreams. They're communicating when people have near-death experiences. I interviewed
Have you ever
James
had a dream like that?
Landoli.
As an example, have you ever had a dream like that?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
I had one. Look, it's a dream. It's a dream. Okay. As far as I know. But in the dream, there was like a gray. I was in a craft in the dream, and they said, when we come for you, will you get on the craft? And I said, yes, get me the fuck out of here. That was a dream. That's it. That was the dream. But yeah, I've had a dream like that. It's just weird. Again, it's
was
probably
it
my subconscious. No, it was just a dream. It was
regular dream.
Well, look, I'm just, the experience was identical to a dream. Could it have been a communication? I'm open to it. Could it have been my subconscious? 100%. I'm just saying, all I can say for a fact is I had a dream that went like that. That's it.
So I guess the short answer to your question is I think it's related to what we don't know about the nature of reality. So that's why I'm very interested, and I spend the majority of my time, actually, my working time and a lot of my free time, is looking into these austere concepts, like where does our science actually sit on consciousness? Like what is consciousness. And I look into the evidence for telepathy. You look at in my free time, actually, I watch like near-death experience accounts. I think some of our best information is coming from near-death experiences. If we want to know what's past the veil of death, why don't we ask people who have died and come back? It seems like that's like the best.
And it's not like there's like one or two. There are tens of thousands, and they're all
thousands.
relatively consistent. And there are people who are like I interviewed a neuroscientist, like a Harvard neuroscientist, who went through that experience, and he's just like, yeah, like you can't that it. And I also asked him about an experience I had where I pancaked my Humvee and survived, right? So I'll just very, very quickly. So, on the Humvee, some of them have a hatch where there's a guy up there with a 50 cal. I was the guy up there with a 50 cal, and my driver, I told him to turn hard right. We were on sand, and it just pancaked. And it happened so fast that I was reported dead.
It flipped fully, or?
Yeah, it landed with the wheels up, right?
Wow.
So when it happened to me, time slowed. Like I could have taken a calculus exam. Maybe that's a little over. I could have done like a calculus problem, right? It was like, I'm like, okay, it's about to roll. What do you do? Well, you're supposed to drop down to the Humvee, secure something, and then make sure everybody is okay, and then exit the vehicle as soon as you can. Okay. So I was fine. Like, unharmed, nothing. But I asked this neuroscientist, and I don't know why his name is escaping me right now, but you would know the name if you heard it. Dr. Eben Alexander. And I'm like, the brain's got like a mechanism that does that, right? That just like has you like hyper focused on that. And he's just like, no. No, it doesn't work that way, because he had a similar experience where he would jump out of aircraft. He was like he did a lot of skydiving when he was in school, and something happened where he almost died, and he made a series of decisions that your material brain can't do, right? And that brought up the reason I shared my experience, is because that kind of reminded me of that. And I just wanted to know, I'm like, surely there's some mechanism in the brain that does that. And he's like, no, there's nothing in your brain, as far as he knows, that slows time. So anyway, for what it's worth, yeah, there's just stuff we still can't explain. Anyway, I didn't mean to intrude on your thought or prevent you from completing your thought.
No, man, it's your show. People here to listen to you.
Yeah, I'm going to get complaints already. I'm talking too much.
Well, I think it's super interesting. For one thing, there's a 2019 study where, and I can't remember the actual, may still be up. I can give you the name. Congenital absence, corpus callosum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a part of the brain actually that
connects the brain. Both
connects the left to the right side. And what they found is actually the brain, it can still communicate even in people where that is severed. So basically where there's no connection between the left and right sides of the brain. Gary Nolan told me about this, and I remembered reading a study. So actually the two halves of the brain can communicate without having a direct neuronal connection. And if you look at our brain states, right, why do we have brain waves? You can just like look into anything that our science says and just actually look into it without just buying what they say, and you're going to find just huge gaping holes, right? Like, why do we have brain waves in the first place? There's very weak arguments from our current neuroscience regime, but they directly correspond to your conscious states, right? So you're totally asleep. You're going to be in theta. You're going to have very low, wide brain waves. And when you're dead, you flatline, right? And when you're active, when you wake up, you're going to be in alpha. It's like 8 to 12 hertz, which also matches like the Schumann resonance of the Earth, right? Which
I was going to say, and by the way, the alpha wave state is also the ideal state for remote viewing, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
And I think beta is probably what you're operating day to day, sort of, And then alpha is a little bit like when you're driving and you're kind of in the zone. That's kind of alpha.
Then I haven't seen the direct evidence. I've heard anecdotally that, so I'm not sure it's 100%, but when people die, they will hit like gamma, go up to high frequencies, like 80 hertz, etc. I've also heard that's related to DMT trips, is somewhere around 80 hertz.
It's also Bledsoe. When Bledsoe detects the orbs coming in, he also goes into gamma as well.
So they can, we have electromagnetic frequencies that directly correlate to our brain states. You know, you can measure these from outside the brain. So I think there is some, you asked about what is the phenomenon. I think related to learning more about the nature of reality, I think what we're going to find is that we're probably all in some sort of electromagnetic ether, if you will. There's some sort of connection between all of us. If you look at our mainstream physics, I think the biggest thing that has been hidden through Tesla, et cetera, is the ether, right? That there is a connection between everything.
Which is why a lot of this psychic stuff works even in Faraday cages, right?
Yep. Yeah, and what kind of tipped me off on this was the Bob Salas UAP event, where basically, if people don't know, he worked in a Minuteman silo. He was a major, and it was at Motham, I believe.
Malmstrom.
Malmstrom. And basically, a huge orb showed up at the gate, and he got a call from the security forces saying, "Hey, there's this crazy orb up here, etc." And then what's really interesting is that all of the missiles went down at the same time. And
they're not connected. They're not connected.
Exactly.
Like,
not only are they not connected,
like the physical infrastructure of the missiles, they are not there. Each one is an independent unit. It is not connected to the others.
Exactly. And even more than that, it's not that it's not connected, fully shielded, like completely Faraday shielded. Why? Because a nuke's put off EMPs, right? Which are extreme electromagnetic pulses. And that will knock down all of your electronics. So if your missiles aren't inside of a Faraday
Chris,
cage,
the Wall Street Journal said that the Air Force did a EMP test on a live nuclear missile site with missiles aimed at Russia with teams that were ready to push the button. The Air Force decided to test without telling the teams and like just EM pulse them. That's totally normal, right? Like in training, like you would totally like a live missile crew with guns loaded, like they would say, yeah, totally realistic. Wall Street Journal, like they were like right on that one, right? Right.
Yeah, I'm sure they would totally EMP live missiles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
ridiculous. Sounds legit. That sounds legit, right?
Even then, you look, they're in like 4 feet of steel, completely separated through Faraday cages. So how are you going to knock off the navigation systems if with electromagnetic energy, if they're fully shielded, unless there is some sort of ether, some sort of connective, whatever substrate, if you will, that could allow that. There's also other examples. If you look, our current quantum mechanics, if you actually look at it, again, if you look at any science, you see how screwed it is. But basically, our best theory right now for quantum mechanics is quantum field theory. And quantum field theory just says that there's a bunch of different fields. You have the Higgs field, and that's where the Higgs boson is. An excitation in the Higgs field is, and then you have the electron field, and you have the proton field. They're actually just stacked fields. And so even our current quantum mechanic theory, our best theory, requires some sort of substrate. But we're just living in this terrible, I call it the dark ages of science, where they say there's no ether, right? And that's really where they have huge problems accepting any of this stuff, why they won't even fund any sort of money to research it, is it doesn't matter what your evidence is for telepathy, because telepathy can't exist, because there's no way that we can actually interact with each other across distances, right? Because there's no medium. Never mind that I can literally detect your brain waves from outside your brain, right? And see if you're asleep or if you're awake, or if you're in gamma. You can literally detect brainwaves outside the brain.
Well, never mind quantum mechanics, like the principle of non-locality, right? Like quantum entanglement. Like you can have a quark that's on the other side of the universe that's coupled with a quark here, and it will change it'll spin instantaneously with the other quark, right?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to believe any of their conclusions. I think it's just all of it's just totally messed up, totally jacked. But I'm very excited because I think we're finally seeing that, and I think AI is going to be your great equalizer, so that artificial intelligence isn't going to have the same limits. At least if you can make the systems not be limited, right? I think like ChatGPT 5, I've seen is completely limited. Man, they totally screwed the pooch on that one. But up until then, you could ask it to look at past experiments and say, hey, is the evidence for the quark really as strong as they say it is? And it isn't, actually. You can have it look into the current scientific paradigm, and it can see that it's totally jacked. So I think that what we're hitting against is total lack of understanding of the nature of reality. Life after death. What does life actually mean? What is consciousness? How do you actually interact? How could telepathy be real? What is actually pulling the strings behind the anti-disclosure movement? For instance, I argue it's a control system based on the system maintaining homeostasis, essentially. And then what is the interaction off of our planet? If we're not just this dead, if we're not just the lone candle of life and consciousness in the entire freaking universe, which I think it's just a totally ridiculous. We're gonna look so dumb in like 1,000 years. If we're not just this lone candle of existence on this planet, then that means we're connected to higher levels and parallel levels. So that means around us there should be other, I would argue, systems like ours, where you have planets similar to ours, probably in the same even level of development, right? If you look into your body, look at any tissue, your skin cells are going to be around the same level. Maybe there's different layers of skin, or etc. So I think we're probably surrounded by other solar systems, probably similar to ours, and I think we're kept insular because that's the way the system is. And so you probably have some interaction across these boundaries, but you're going to have control systems in place. Like, there's a reason an ant colony or a bee colony will control a certain area of land, right? And you're not going to have other ants coming in there. That's how evolution has evolved over billions of years. And so I think we're just part of a larger system, and it goes through consciousness. I think there's different layers of consciousness. I think there's different layers to reality. And I think a lot of the layers of reality is through scale. So if everything is just electromagnetic, if you're not actually touching, atoms aren't actually touching, then what is actually going on? I think it could be electromagnetic. Then really scale is just perspective. So the fact that you and I are communicating is just our level, our size dimension. Like, we just take everything for granted that there are sizes. Like, why is there different sizes to anything? Why? Like, we just take it, we take everything for granted. Of course, I'm made of 37 trillion cells. That's preposterous. It doesn't make any sense. Why is anything bigger or smaller? And I think those are the dimensions. Like, I argue that we can see dimensions and its size. And then what you're seeing is the consciousness will just change. Like you kind of mentioned before with that short story, or Stalking the Paradigm, maybe, is that you're...
Oh, yeah, Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Yeah.
The Wild Pendulum, yeah. Is that your conscious experience will just depend on the scale of that dimension. So that's why I think nations are having a conscious experience. I think the cells in your body are having some sort of conscious experience. And my argument is, why would it stop there? Like, we just assume we're the highest entity in the universe, right? Is the human, and I'm like, dude, the human...
This is ridiculous.
Nothing. Like, I mean, it's like saying, it's like a little cell in your body being like, the cell is the center of the universe, And it is, right? For that entity, like, it is the center, but humans are just one step in the scale. And I think it's obvious. Like, why did you wake up? Or you were born into a system, they gave you a number. Like, you have to go to work. You had to go to train. Like, there was no other option. Somehow the system just made it so you had to go and train to do whatever your job is to fulfill the needs of the system. And who decides that? It wasn't any single it wasn't another person. They didn't do it. So who did it? We just say the environment. We're just like, just how it is. I just wake up every day. I can't understand it. I got to go to work. So I don't know. I think we're going to learn a ton in the next 10 years. I've already learned personally so much in the last few years. So I think things are going to change quickly.
Yeah, I've become a lot more intuitive in the last 3 years. But like I said, I think at the beginning of the last episode, I told you the two owls that showed up like a minute before we started the last show. Like, that was not random. Like, there was a reason for that. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll ever understand what the reason for it was, but the nature of this discussion is typified by that, right? Like, we're talking about how there are likely these macro systems, I might call it Gaia, right? Like the planet, right? It is an organism. Earth is an organism. It's a superorganism. And maybe it has a hyper intelligence that we just aren't aware of. And I think that's a manifestation of that hyper intelligence. It's like, you're going to talk about how nature is part of a larger superstructure in the nature of reality today. So we're going to remind you that we told you before you had this discussion that you were going to have this discussion. Because again, you talk about inertia. Does physics even know what time is?
No.
Right? Like, is time an emergent property? Like water is an emergent property? Like hydrogen has, hydrogen's a gas, oxygen's a gas. And when you suddenly combine the two, you have this thing that's wetness, like water, like, right? It could just be an emergent property of reality. It might just be how we process what happens, but maybe it's simultaneous. Maybe everything that was ever going to happen to you has already happened, and you're just experiencing it in snapshots over time. But the present you're only in the current moment at any given time. And there might be something that can observe you at a higher level of reality or a higher dimension and can see the entire story from beginning to end. I mean, we have things that do that now. They're called movies, right? The entire movie is there. It's in the reel, but you're just seeing snapshots but I can play those snapshots in any order if I want. They just wouldn't make any sense. But it all exists at once, right? Like that movie, the entirety of what happens in that movie is right there. You can jump at any point to any part of that movie. We just process it in a linear fashion. It could be the same thing, that could just be another anecdote for time. Same thing with a radio station, right? Like if I'm listening to grunge on one station, right, there's hard rock playing on another station at the same time. I'm just tuned into that current frequency. But there are all sorts of things on the frequency band that are happening that there might be some classified conversation going on in the lower megahertz range at the exact same time, right? I just can't tune to that frequency. So, who knows? But sorry, continue with your thread. Right now, in fact, as you were talking, I looked at one of my videos that I accidentally scheduled for like 13 hours earlier than it was supposed to go out. And there was already one comment. It was a Lynn Buchanan video. It's just like, the host needs to stop talking. I want to hear Lynn Buchanan. I don't care what the host has to say. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, thank you for sharing. Anyway, I want to get that comment right now. So anyway, continue with your thought, Chris. They're here to see you, not me.
Well, it made me think of Dean Radin. So we mentioned him before, but his hypothesis, I guess, is that consciousness could be the base. So it's actually the base substrate. And that's where physics comes out of consciousness, and then chemistry, and then biology, right? Because right now, up until now, the whole argument, the paradigm is that physics is the base of reality, right? That's why they create these giant colliders. They're slamming these little particles together. They're looking for what's the base particle. And then from the physics, then you get chemistry, and then you get biology from chemistry, right? Like you kind of mentioned there with gases mixing. And then from biology, now we get consciousness, right? And then that's the argument. But the problem, like I mentioned before, is they can't even think of an experiment to test even where that comes from, that connection between biology and consciousness, right? So that's the hard problem of consciousness, is we can't even think of a way to try and find it. And so Dean Radin's argument is actually it works out just fine if you just move consciousness to the bottom. So actually consciousness is the base, and from that you get physics, chemistry, and then biology, what we see as you and me. And so that would be a complete paradigm shift. Yeah.
Even Dr. Eben Alexander's experience, his brain was essentially destroyed by like this brain-eating bacteria. So there was no way for him to have memories of the experience that he had if the physical brain is the only thing that's capable of processing them. And there are things that happened as well that you couldn't explain in any conventional sense. But you have an actual neuroscientist who died, or who was dying and had all these experiences and could explain that the conventional model of how the physical brain works doesn't explain what happened to him. And that happened I think what happened to him happened over a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago. And people are still on the fence. It's like the evidence out there is overwhelming that there is something beyond the physical, whatever that is.
Exactly. Yeah, it took 200 years before they could accept microscopic life. I mean, 200 years, it's a lot of generations. And they could literally look and see the little animals moving around. They could literally look at your cells in your hand and see, right? But it still took 200 years before the doctors, right, the smartest people in our society, before they would accept it and start washing their hands, even though people are just dying left and right. So I think it's the same thing. That's what we're coming up against, is these UAP encounters, I think, they're a view, right? They're the anomaly into the next understanding for humanity, right? They're a view into physics. It would mean that consciousness is probably the base. Because how else could you have memories? How could you have experience if your brain is dead? It means that the experience is below, right? That the physics is based on the experience, that based on the consciousness.
Consciousness is fundamental.
Exactly. How could remote viewing possibly work, right? It would have to be outside of physics, I think, some sort of base substrate. How could these UAP encounters be happening? How could you have channelers, these mediums who, like Bashar, who are, transmitting from some alien intelligence? Could any of that be correct? Or even astrology? I actually think astrology is probably much more accurate. Yeah.
I definitely want to continue on that. But like even if you don't believe that what he's channeling is, I mean, first of all, how do you know what he says he's channeling is what he's channeling, right? That's the other thing too. Like, how can you trust what's coming? But regardless, whatever he's channeling gives him information that turns out to be accurate or correct, right? That's for whatever reason. But you're going to say something about astrology.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked in the previous episode about cycles. We talked about lifespans of, I argued, nations have lifespans. That's what we're seeing now is kind of the end of the American empire. If you look at what astrology is, it's really tracking all of these different cycles. And again, it's the same thing, is there's no medium for these faraway planets, these systems to actually affect anything on Earth. Like, they couldn't possibly affect us. And really, because there's no connection, right? There's no connection with us and the rest of the universe. My argument is we're all connected through this base substrate. Whatever this base substrate is, it's related, somehow it's related to consciousness, conscious experience. So that would mean that we are connected, and actually gravity has no distance limit. So there is a physical connection. We are literally physically connected to everything else through our current understanding of gravity, which I think is wrong again. So I think we are connected to the larger cosmos. And I think these ancient, if you look at all the ancient civilizations, they all had some sort of star maps connection with the cosmos. So I think it leans in that direction as well. Somehow we are connected to the rest of the cosmos. I believe there are cycles on Earth that continue, that repeat. You have the 26,000 year
Bakun,
main cycle, if you will, of the zodiac. When I went to Egypt, I was blown away. I couldn't believe they had like the zodiac everywhere. So I think we are going to find out more. And I think we are going to find out that there's a deeper history on Earth related to humanity. And I think we're going to learn that there are cycles, and that there probably could have been previous advanced civilizations, such as the myth of Atlantis, if you will, the younger Dryas, that are going to lead us into this direction. And I think it points to the phenomenon, near-death experience, all the investigations I've done. It points to that we are connected somehow with the rest of the cosmos. I think we're connected with each other. It's somehow related to consciousness, and these entities that we're dealing with, they could either be entities at our dimensional level or even entities at larger, maybe even smaller dimensional levels. I don't know, but look at David Grush. He said that the biologics may have never been alive. So it's almost like they're almost like a vessel, if you will, for some sort of consciousness or conscious entity that could be from another dimension. And when I say another, for me, the dimensions, yes, through consciousness, but I see the dimensions, like I already said, through size. Like when a policeman knocks on your door, or like the FBI, when the FBI knocks on your door, you see a person, right? It's a human, but it's not a human knocking on your door, right? It's the frickin' FBI. Like the federal state is knocking on your door, and that human has all the power of that federal system.
Yeah, it's a cell. It's a cell of the, it's like a lymphocyte that shows up at your door, right?
It's a representative of that dimensional entity, which is the state, right? And you see it as a human. So I think what these UAPs could be is a representative. And that's why the communication gets so weird, is because when we're interacting with it at our level, we could be interacting something that's a completely different scale, dimensional level than us. You could be interacting with like some sort of weird conscious planet, if you will, or some other giant civilization that's interacting
like
with us. Some sort of larger entity. Yeah, exactly. And we see it as a biologic, or the ship was alive, the ship had a consciousness, or the gray was never alive. We can't even tell if it was alive or dead, but it was inhabited by some sort of conscious entity. So yeah, I think we're going to find out in the next generation, hopefully sooner than later, that we are connected to everything, that there is macroscopic life, that there is life after death. We're not alone in the universe. It's ridiculous. I think we're going to find out the universe is much older than 13.8 billion years. I think that's just stupid.
Oh, no, it's like a year or two back, they already said it was like double that. They keep like learning more, and they keep extending the life of the universe.
But it's just ridiculous. Like, we know just because we're here, that the planet's basically almost 5 billion, right? They say 4.6, I think. Let's say 5 billion years. We say the whole entire universe, which is literally like 21 orders of magnitude. What is that? I don't know. Quadrillions of sizes bigger than us. That's only 3 times older than our planet. That's like, this is literally what everyone says. And if you say that 13.8 billion years is too small, like, people look at me like I'm crazy, that I say it's ridiculous. But there's no way in hell. Like, I would bet my life right now that the universe is older than at least 1 trillion years. Like, there's no way. I think it's quadrillions of years. Actually, when you base off lifespans, I already mentioned lifespan of a human. You can actually, it's called Kleber's law. The lifespan of a mouse will be about 2 years. The lifespan of a human's 80 years. Lifespan of an elephant is 100 years. So it's actually a very accurate, well-known biological rule or law called Kleber's law, that the mass of a living entity corresponds to its lifespan. So like a cell lives a couple weeks. A cell lives a couple weeks, and then you scale up. It actually follows, it's a power law, its mass to the 0.28 power, right? So if you just scale that out, then it means nations live for thousands of years. If you look at civilizations, planets live for around, or biospheres live for around 80 million years. And every 80 million years, Earth has a major collapse. The biosphere resets around every 80 million years. We're at 63 million years now, I think. So we're pretty much,
that's good.
we're in the realm of a major biosphere death and rebirth. And stars live up to 1 trillion years. Like red dwarf cells, even if you look in their stupid current standard solar model, cosmology says that red dwarfs live for trillions of years. Galaxies live from 10 to 100 trillion years is if you follow the same curve. And then that means the universe is around in the quadrillions of years. So 10 to 100, like quadrillion years, it's 3 zeros after trillions. So I think we're going to find that.
By the way, there was a scientist, his name's Gupta, based on some studies he did using the James Webb telescope. He upped it to 26.7 billion years. However, the mainstream scientific community is like rigidly holding on to this 13.8 billion years. And then just recently somebody said that it's highly likely we were inside a black hole, which would imply that like all of these observations are based on a universe that we observe from inside a black hole, which implies there's something on the other side of that black hole, which is probably far older. So even you're saying it could be quadrillions of years without considering that and just observing what we see outside of that. But
just ignore all the stupid shit they say and just look at it like just look at it with common sense, fresh eyes. The Earth is 5 billion years old, right? We know that relatively accurately.
Yeah.
Then go and look how big the Earth is compared to the galaxy, right?
Or the sun. Just the sun.
Anything. Just go to the galaxy because just go to the galaxy. Galaxy's good, right? It's 10 to the 21 meters across, 21 zeros. You know, the sun is 10 to the 9 meters across. Earth is like 10 to the 7. So just look at Earth is 5 billion years old. Galaxy, how big a galaxy is. And then just imagine how stupid it would be to think that the galaxy is only 3 times older than the Earth. I mean, it's so stupid. And then you watch like everywhere, they're like, and they talk about it and they're like, and we've been around, this has been happening for 13 billion years, like 14 billion. They say it like it's this long time. And
they say it like Dr. Evil, right?
Yeah. 14 billion years, like everybody says it like it's some amazingly long time. And it is, right? But not for a galaxy. It's nothing. Like a billion years is nothing. Like our galaxy does a rotation like every 220 million years, like one rotation. That's like a day to a galaxy. 220 million years is a day. Earth goes around in 24 hours. The sun spins every 28 and a half days, which is exactly the same as the moon orbiting our planet. The galaxy.
Which is why we only see one face, right?
Yeah. The moon, and I haven't seen this written anywhere actually, it has a 28 and a half day cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're married or you have a girlfriend, you know that time. What's interesting is the sun at the equator, actually, the sun has different rotation rates at the poles. At the equator, it's exactly the same, 28 and a half days. So the sun does a full rotation in 28 and a half days, which is the same as the moon doing a full orbit around the Earth. Just happens to be exactly the same. Also, the sun is the same size as the moon if you look at it, right, on the sky. It's exactly the same. That's why the moon will do a perfect eclipse over the sun. So even though it's 400 times closer, it just happens to be exactly the same size as the sun, right? And the orbit time of the moon is exactly the same as the rotation of the sun. So yeah, I think we're going to find everything is linked. 13.8 billion years is nothing. It is nothing to a galaxy. And a galaxy is so small compared to the universe, it's ridiculous. So this idea, when they say billions of years, I don't know, man. It's hard not to look and just think you're crazy because the mainstream's just so out to lunch. But I'm optimistic. I think we're going to get some huge breakthroughs soon. I think there's cracks in the dam. I think there's enough people like us and Dean Radin, Michael Levin, and Gary Nolan. You have all these scientists actually looking into it now, that the control systems, I think, can't keep it down forever.
How do you think disclosure is going to progress going forward?
Initially, I was a huge proponent for just catastrophic disclosure, just get it out there.
I still am. I totally still am.
Yeah, I am, but I'm much more tempered. Like I said, I've just learned in the grand scheme of things, like 13 billion years is nothing. I think there's been countless Earths. I think we're surrounded by trillions of other worlds. Mm-hmm. I think we all live forever, like in some sort of consciousness realm. Yeah, if the whole Earth just blew up, I'd be fine with it. I'm sure that it'll just happen again. Mm-hmm. So I just have the longer view now, I guess. Like, once you realize the universe is quadrillions of years old, like, if we don't get disclosure for like 10 years, is it really a big deal? Maybe it is better for the system if we just gradually learn. And to us at our level, it looks like it's not happening very fast. But if you look at the national level, there's just amazing changes going on the world, the AI revolutions. So I think we're just going to have ridiculous changes over the next 10 to 20 years. And I see us coming out on the other side as just being much freer, much richer. I think humans are going to have to find a search for meaning. And in my own mind, I guess I've had disclosure then.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming at all. And I think the only way we can find out for ourselves is to make a direct connection with whatever it is. If that's dangerous, oh well, the government had its opportunity to warn us, and they shit the bed on that, to be honest. And I'm a full proponent of catastrophic disclosure because I think the system needs a collapse. I think it, and I mean like a well-orderly collapse where the current crop of people who are all compromised at the top, right? I mean, there is an absolute reason why Epstein existed. There's an absolute reason why none of it is coming out. It's because everybody at the top has been compromised. They're all, and I think flushing them out of the system would be an added benefit of catastrophic disclosure. So yeah, that's kind of probably why my channel doesn't grow, or it grows, but why YouTube just systematically unsubscribes people. For whatever reason, maybe it's just a glitch of the YouTube system, or you don't think it's a glitch? I'm open to it.
Epstein was from the system. I think he's a part of the system. He's a control mechanism.
Right. Well, how do you control sociopaths, right? Or psychopaths, right? There's only one way to control them. It's to compromise them so that they can't, because you're not really going to get them to agree with their gentler nature, right? You just have to, anything they do, if they go against the system, they get destroyed. So
it's a great control mechanism, right? If you have the leverage on every single person, all of a sudden the system can do what it needs to.
And the reason that you have to do that sort of thing, because you can get leverage on people in other ways, but when people have so much money and power, it's hard to get at them through those mechanisms. You have to get at them through other means. Whereas for the common citizen, you can just ruin them, right?
Yeah.
You just frivolous, everyone is one frivolous lawsuit away from, not everyone, but the average person is one frivolous lawsuit away from ruin, right? They don't even have to be right. Right? So another reason why our system is fundamentally broken, right? Only the rich can survive it. So yeah, I think the best way to do it is to seek in your own way and prove to yourself that this stuff exists. Look, I've never, as far as I know, I've never consciously seen entities, right? I just haven't. Never seen a ghost, never seen, a gray, at least consciously that I know of. But it would help me believe, or actually, I shouldn't say believe. I believe people see what they say they're seeing. I don't know, right, if it's real because I haven't personally experienced, much of what people reportedly experienced. But I think having those experiences helps buttress your belief that there's something out there that is above human, right? Or grander than human. Maybe we're all part of the same thing and we're just kind of stuck in these meat suits for this lifetime to limit what our true capabilities are. So, and it's all connected, that's for sure. Whatever it is, it's humanity is much more capable than we think we are. And I think that's part of the control system, as you mentioned, right? The powers that be don't want everybody to know that they can remote view Langley, Virginia on any Wednesday afternoon if they want to. Right? It's not good for the spy business. It's not good for national security. And I understand that. But, I think the control system right now is trying to cull humanity in a sense. Right? Is trying to reduce population size. So,
yeah, for me, I think the best way forward, what I'm spending my efforts on is to, I guess, just make the argument to show people that there is macroscopic life. If there is, if I'm correct, then I think the best way forward is for us to find a way to communicate or to manipulate, if you will, the macroscopic life, right? To find shared goals. What do the nations want? What do they need? How can we make sure they feel safe and secure? But we also can raise the regular life of humans at our level, right? So the more you know about reality, then the more you can improve, I guess, the general welfare, general life, right? When we learned about viruses, then we could start washing our hands. Not good for the viruses, right? Or for the infections at their level, but we were able to manipulate that dimensional level to improve our own. So my hope is, rather than just think of the world as some undiscoverable, we can't possibly know how politics could work or why nations do the things they do or why they always lie to their populace, why national security always trumps the human dimension, right? The level. I think when we can understand as a group, like mainstream understands that, hey, it does exist. Now we can take actions and actually try and manipulate the higher dimensions. So manipulate the macroscopic levels to better our own, just like we did at the microscopic levels. So, but you have to know what you're dealing with. You can't just believe stupid shit all the time. You can't just believe the universe is 13.8 billion years based on some ridiculous theory about expanding space, which they've never even seen expanding space. Like there's no direct evidence of expanding space. It's so stupid. Like, and you have to change your paradigm. You have to be willing to accept other things. You have to be willing to accept that you're wrong and move forward. And so that's what I hope, is that we're going to see that change. And when we can realize that, hey, macroscopic life does exist, but the benefit is, the good part is, we are a part of it, right? So we're connected. So if we can just convince or manipulate the higher dimensions, show them that we're here, maybe they should be nicer to us, treat us better, or maybe we will axe them, maybe it will be the end of the nation states, if they don't clear up their act. Like, we will kill them. And they should stop being so scared of death. Like, stop being such a wuss. Like, everything dies. America will die. You'll be fine. Like, get over it. Like, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be the end of the world. No, like, You don't need to blow up the entire world. You don't need mutually assured destruction, nuclear destruction of the entire world, because you won't, because you're going to die. Just get over it, man. You're going to die. Like, it'll be fine. Like, we'll move on. There'll be a new nation. We can build it better. It won't be based on slavery. Well, it will be based on slavery, but not slavery at that time.
Not the slave.
Based on a different type.
It's still based on slavery, right? It's wage slavery. Right.
We could base it on something else, something better.
It's a kindler, gentler form of slavery.
Yeah.
But by the way, the name of that story is, it's pretty aptly titled too. It is "We Are Not Monsters." It's by Stephen Barnes. It's in the anthology. It's in the description below. It always has been. It's an anthology I put together it was published in 2022. It's called Weird World War IV. Again, not that one, because that was my publisher's idea. I probably wouldn't have gone in that direction. But the first one, Weird World War III, I came up with in like 2017. And it was basically about, what if we went to war with Russia? And it came out in like 2020. And then 2 years later, we're effectively at war with Russia. So there's like a lot of the way things happen is pretty strange. And a lot of the things that happen to us in our lives kind of come back. Anyway, there's something more than the physical out there. Precognition is a real thing. There are many examples of it. And most of the time we don't even realize we're doing it. But we have a sense of the past, present, and future. We talk to ourselves, right, from the future in some sense, to kind of, again, this control mechanism, kind of make sure that we're going on the right path. Like, there's certain things that happen to us that are traumatic at the time, but place us in a better place, right? Something traumatic happened to me in a job situation that if that hadn't happened, I would have never started this podcast. So, as an example. So I think we'll probably keep meandering on. I think now is probably a good time to end the episode. Do you have any final words for the audience?
Yeah, which is kind of what you mentioned there is there's more to reality. That's what I believe. That's what changed my view looking into UAPs. That's really the biggest advantage, I'd say, is changed my whole perspective. And so I'd encourage people who are out there who don't like their situation or are unhappy, is it can be changed. And, do it. There's no reason stopping you. Stop being a wuss. Make the changes you want to make in your life, and you'll see it may suck when you're making the changes, but then once you get to the other side, it can be awesome. So, I've been in terrible situations. Like you mentioned there, you had a terrible issue with your job, but pain is temporary and you can make those changes. It can always get better. And now I'm very happy. I'm very content. Yeah, I hope that for everyone else.
One thing I didn't ask you, and I want to ask you before we end the episode, how did you end up, because you do a podcast full time, right? How did you end up in that path? Like, were you doing something else? Did you intend to do this full time and it just worked out? Or did it kind of just evolve that way? You just kind of fell into it?
I guess it devolved into it. I was always interested in personal finance and, financial freedom. And so I've just focused on investing. I wrote a book called Military Millionaire when I was in the Air Force, and then made it, trudge through 20 years, which is quite difficult. I think only 12% of the people actually retire with a pension. And I just didn't want to be an airline pilot like everyone else I knew. So I looked at other options, and, living in Portugal where I live and having enough assets at the time that, I could purchase a house, I could purchase the vehicles, and then I could live off the pension. So it's more that I started doing the podcast to impress my kids and also just to, I guess, try and make an impact, try and make some sort of, have find meaning. I think meaning is very important. I think it's critical. I kind of got to a situation where I checked all the boxes. I got everything I wanted, and there was still something missing. I think especially the American way of life is, I'm going to get to retirement. There's this huge thing of retirement, and then I'll be happy. And it's like, well, so I got there quite young, and I realized that doesn't make you happy. Like, I got everything I wanted, and it was like kind of the universe is like, well, here you go, and I was like, dang shit, like it's not about that, so where can you get meaning? And so for me, it's, coming on podcasts like this, saying my crazy ideas or whatever, but at least saying it, getting the information out there. If it affects one person in a positive way, then I think that's worth it, so it doesn't pay, you have a full-time job, obviously. So I couldn't do this full-time if I didn't have a pension, if I didn't focus on.
I work 7 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day. And I've been doing
12 to 15 hours.
I have to. I don't have if I want to keep this thing up, right, and still do my day job. And by the way, I did it after my last job situation. I wasn't going to go back because I was so disheartened, so cynical about, and I won't get into it, but like the whole wokeness movement was a poison pill that, I'm not going to say more, but it really embittered me about the current power structure and made me have a fundamental distrust of all institutions. I'll never and a trust that they'll never regain. But I kind of did this for 2.5 years, and I almost lived half a century on this planet, and it was the happiest 2.5 years of my life. But I had something that just fell into my lap, and I just ran an experiment. This sounds crazy, but I just said a prayer, and I did like a binary test. I said, if I'm going to continue to be independent, show me a hawk. If I'm going to be, if I'm going to get this role, then should take it, show me a raven. Within 5 minutes, a raven flew 10 feet over my head, looked down at me and went, right? And was that a coincidence? Sure, maybe, but I don't think so. So it's one of those things. Sometimes I think we all have a path we're supposed to follow, and this is just part of the path. But someday I'd like to do this independently again. Because again, I was starting to make money through a variety of means. It wasn't the only thing I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of different things. But I had a lot of money saved, but it was still, cash flow was at the very beginning burning a lot. Toward the end, it was burning a little bit, but I still had to replenish it. So I'm just going to keep suffering until, YouTube will stop deleting my subscribers, and I'll get to a level that I can, kind of comfortably walk away. But I'm just not there yet. So the beatings will continue until morale improves.
You can move to the Philippines, live there $1,200 a month pretty comfortably.
Well, yeah, I've already the house has been paid off. Been paid off and all that. If I didn't have a wife that that spent money, I wouldn't have to work. I have everything I need.
Yeah.
But I have kids, and they're not all out of the house yet, so I still have responsibilities. But
yeah,
it doesn't help that California takes not California. California and the federal government take 55 cents on every dollar I make. So
that's crazy.
It's slavery. It's literally slavery. I'm a slave for the state. So I don't know how long this system's going to last, but I just hope that the government doesn't get into a war, because they're not they can try to draft people, but it's not going to be like the Vietnam War, where only the left is kind of against it. They're going to run up against armed opposition, because veterans are telling their kids not to serve because of all just how they were wastefully used in these, nonsensical wars overseas. So, hey, that country gets free healthcare, but we don't, So, anyway.
Well, I think it'll change. Yeah. We'll see how painful it is.
It's going to be painful, but the elites they're going to get what this is what they wanted. So they're going to get it, and they're going to get it hard. So anyway, thank you, my friend. It was an absolute pleasure, and we'll hopefully talk soon.
All right, Sean, thanks for having me on. And yeah, thanks to all your listeners listening this far to us.
It's just my whiny voice. All right. Well, thank you, Chris.
All right, mate.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.